Okay, this is a little bit newer topic. It's related to Kubernetes. For those who were with us here in my earlier presentation, we talked about orchestration service on AWS. This time we will talk about orchestration service, but mainly targeting on-prem data center. This technology can be easily stretched also to the AWS, and I will mention just a few details about stretching to the AWS and AWS cloud, VMware cloud on AWS infrastructure, because my colleague after my presentation will talk about a little bit in the detail about it. So I don't want to have a same story twice in one day. I don't think that this is that interesting topic. So basically, we'll talk about pivotal containers. There is a relatively new product from the VMware who is targeting one special customer who wants to have this cloud environment functionality. For the users who use AWS, I think they are very familiar with this terminology in on-prem data center. So let us begin. First of all, I have to repeat this. Let me introduce myself for those who were not with us this morning earlier. My name is Alen. I'm project manager at Hingemark. We are a company from the Zagreb, Croatia. Almost 30 years in the market. We have quite a lot of customers in the region, in Europe, in the United States, in the Middle East. We are developing code. We like to introduce ourselves like a custom software development agency. Customers already usually come to us to develop something for them. Lately, they are asking also how to implement that code in the infrastructure, whether it is on-premise infrastructure in their own data center or it is in AWS. Therefore, we are lately doing this cloud consulting and migration to the cloud, and also integration for on-prem data center. We are AWS partners for the cloud part of the story, but we are also partners of the VMware, who is really one of the market leaders in these technologies who are to be used in virtualization and similar activities in on-prem data center. There is a lot of customers, you will be amazed how big number is that, who are still don't believe the cloud, who are not ready to migrate to the cloud, and they really want to have all those data they own under their own eyes. So that's why we decided to partner with VMware, just in case when someone wants our containers, which is our delivery platform of choice, to be installed easily and managed easily in on-prem data center. This morning I tried to describe containers, and I believe that you are quite familiar with the technology containers. Are you using? Do I need to explain containers in details? No. So with all these benefits which are containers bringing, there are also quite few challenges which are also coming with the technology. When one of the biggest challenge is how to handle big number of containers. One colleague before in the previous presentation mentioned Netflix. In one of their installation, for a simple part, they have more than 1,000 containers operating for one service. So it's pretty complicated environment to be handled, to be monitored, to implement some kind of life cycle monitoring, and you can imagine how difficult that environment is for the upgrades, especially if you don't want to have a downtime or some even more complicated ways of development. Luckily, we have containers. We have containers orchestration service, and one of the biggest, and maybe today one of the most famous orchestration utility available on the market is Kubernetes. And Kubernetes today became de facto standard for the orchestration tool. It's not the only orchestration utility. I mentioned ECS like a, let's say, proprietary vision for orchestration in the AWS, but there are some others publicly available for on-prem data center installation, like a Swarm, like a Nomad or something like that. So this is not the only one, but trust me, it is the industrial standard already. For all those who wanted to install vanilla distribution of Kubernetes in on-prem data center, I believe that they are very aware fact that this is not easy job, not easy task to comply. Even if you are going to use some widely available utilities who will help you to do so, just when you configure and install everything and run your application on this environment, then you will realize that it's only one layer, especially in an enterprise environment, which you have to solve to put it in the fault-tolerant, high available environment. Let me show you what we think that are layers to be fulfilled if you want to achieve all these goals. You all know that you need to have some servers, some physical infrastructure layer. Then you will have to have virtualization infrastructure if you want to use virtualization, if you don't want to install it on the bare metal. And persistent, I mean, we all know that containers are stateless, but there are some specific cases when you want to have stateful containers which need persistent layer for storage when they want to store something for maybe some sharing for any workload for any reason. Then you have, of course, always networking and security to be implemented. Then you have for vanilla Kubernetes some kind of cluster management and lifecycle management. Then, of course, you have to implement Kubernetes, which are coming from the distributor from Google. Yeah. Then you will have to implement some kind of image registry to store your containers safely and distribute all these container images, between your worker nodes. And then, of course, everybody usually forget about these things. This is monitoring, logging, and analytics. We already put them in the day 2 operations, but they are usually forgotten about. And we all usually remember about them only when they are needed, when we need logs from the application centralized, because we have thousands of containers. This is really complicated list of activities to implement by yourself, especially in the on-prem environment. In the cloud, it's much easier. A lot of these functionality is already implemented. You just have to click it. They are there. But we're talking about the on-prem data center. That's why the VMware come up with a turnkey solution who is really well integrated with some other VMware available components. For the virtualization layer, we probably, especially all these administrators who own some kind of on-prem data center, know about vSphere, ESXi. I mean, they are best in the market today, systems for virtualization. They are also offering vSAN, which is distributed storage system built from the machine who are forming a cluster. So we are not adding extra hardware to create a distributed storage. We are using the same space from the physical machine and their storage to create a distributed storage in a secure and safe way. And this is something which can be easily utilized by our PKS stack. So this is something which we are going to talk about in this session. This is a list of components included in the product, and who are actually bringing VMware PKS or Pivotal Container Service stack. The main functionality, the main quality of this product is not only the package itself, but its integration with other VMware components. And as a VMware user, you probably want to easily integrate this kind of solution into existing environment without learning anything new, without changing your infrastructure in some hard way. It's just connecting using VMware, vRealize, it's not here, but vRealize suite who should be already installed in some on-prem data center, because there is a logging solution, network insight solution, and some functionality, which will be heavily used by the PKS if you already have them. Or if you have vSAN, you can easily use a storage in our cluster, in our containers if needed. So what is the idea of this service? The idea is using this service like a cloud native way, like we are working in the cloud. Once installed and configured, the stack will work like managed service in AWS. What you will have to do is use control plane, one-liner, and create your cluster every time when you need it. In one line, you will create a cluster, instantiate from the resources from the physical infrastructure, create your Kubernetes cluster, load your application, and off you go. 2 lines, just like in the cloud. Even easier because you don't need to use CloudFormation. You don't need to use any of these complicated lists, because this stack is providing a lot of these fancy functionalities which you're already used to use in the cloud. Load balancers, routers, logical switches, firewall, like a security groups, and stuff like that. Already preloaded for you and waiting for one command to be instantiated and allowed you to use. Simple as that. So let me dig a little bit deeper and show you what are the main components of the solution. So what PKS is bringing actually is this component surrounded by yellow line. I'm not sure is it yellow or orange, but whatever. So as I said, great integration with the physical layer, who is not even important to mention, because you have to have some kind of physical infrastructure. Then you need to have vSphere, vCenter, virtualization system, but vSAN is optional. If you want it, then you can have it. If you don't have it, then use some other solution. And this is our PKS. Basic of this technology, of this solution, is virtualization, network virtualization system. It's called NS6C for the users who are familiar with the VMware product line. This is newer version of NS6V, who was built and designed for the vSphere. This is newer version, and it's not only built in this solution, it's also going to be a future release for all NS6T virtualization solutions. And this is really great solution, maybe even the best on the market for the network virtualization. What this solution is giving you is opportunity to virtualize all network, create logical switches, logical routers, VPN connections between data centers, stretch your data center to another location, bring it to one logical network, to one logical data center. I mean, you name it. Firewall already implemented. Whatever you want and whatever you used to use in the cloud, it's already pre-built and already included here. Second component, which is really important, is BOSH. For the colleagues who try to install and configure vanilla Kubernetes cluster, you all know that first step should be, okay, I have to decide which operation system am I going to use. Some of the Linux flavor will be used probably, and you will use, let's say, Ubuntu, maybe even Red Hat, whatever. Then once you decide which operation system should be used, then you will have to decide about the sizing of your cluster. How many worker nodes, how many master nodes. I mean, there are some policies when forming a Kubernetes cluster which you must follow, and even when you follow them, it's something you have to decide. Once you decide, then you have run some scripts and your cluster will come alive and you will be able to run your load. This is all what BOSH is doing. BOSH component is actually a product of the people from the team Heptio, who are acquisition of VMware. And Heptio company was founded by the guys who actually started Kubernetes core in Google, in the project back then named Borg. So the same guys started working on the Kubernetes, and after a while they left and they found a new company who actually produced Bosch. So what Bosch doing for you is creating a cluster, provisioning a cluster, resizing a cluster on demand when you need it. So when you want a new worker node, then you send instruction to the Bosch component who will do. They use already pre-built images for the operation system, who is already industrial strength, secured, and all these things which had to be implemented by yourself if you're doing that by your own, while building your own vanilla Kubernetes cluster. And Bosch is doing something extra. If your node fails and is part of, I don't know, some heavy and important workload, you, in comparing to a normal cluster, will have to replace it manually. Add a new virtual machine, cloned or something like that, add it to the cluster, and then cluster will know how to distribute the load. Bosch is doing this instead of you. Bosch agents are preloaded on every master and worker node, and they are periodically contacted by the Bosch management and control plane and health check of these agents. If node fails, so, let's say that you have a stretched data center with a 2 availability zone and internet connection failed in the second availability zone, then you will lose half of your cluster probably. Bosch component will detect that failure automatically, and within 5 minutes it will bring up new nodes, working node replace the failed one, add it automatically to the cluster, and the cluster will take over from there and replace your, add some more containers to fulfill configuration demands. So this is really important for health checking, for the deployment, for the self-healing, really great and I mean irreplaceable component. Then you have in this stack Kubernetes cluster. This is vanilla Kubernetes released by CNCF. This component is actually certified for using Kubernetes release. PKS component and the VMware, they said that they will follow Kubernetes release mechanism. So presumably, if Kubernetes is released 4 times a year, probably we'll have 4 releases of the PKS as well. Current version is 1.5 and it's following Kubernetes 1.15. And in this release, we also, I think, in a beta, we support Windows worker nodes, Windows worker nodes. If anyone will try it, I mean, it's available. Then, of course, you have a control plane. It's a front end of the whole stack. It's a unique endpoint for the user to issue their command, to check status, to check everything what's going on with the cluster. Then also one important component named Harbor. Harbor. This is image registry, and not just simple image registry who is there just to store your images. Container images. This is a container registry with an extra added value. One and really important is security scanning. So once deployed, this component is automatically updated from the internet, and you can use it for security scanning of your containers. You know that containers are security vulnerable, and you have to perform these security scans even before you put it in test and staging environment. So this is a part of new paradigm that we now have. It's not just DevOps, it's DevSecOps. This component can be easily implemented in the pipeline, and you can configure your pipeline in a way that only that only container images who are secure can be signed and can be released to the production or staging or test environment. So this is really important component. Owns notary, every container can be signed and can be fully integrated with the latest security requirements from the Docker. We have also a service broker. This is a direct service to integration with some cloud providers. And that's basically it. This is VMware PKS. What I said before, these are components who VMware users already usually owns. This is vRealize suite. So let's assume that you want to utilize application who is PSI DSS compliance, and you need to create 25 or more pages of the compliant list to show the auditors that you are fully compliant. If you are using vRealize Network Insight, you can just click at one line and this report will be created for you. It will track all your components from the endpoint entry to the application to the end network interface used by your container in this environment, and create everything documented, all firewall, all load balancer, all these details who are involved with the traffic if you want to utilize any of your application in this environment. Or if you want to use centralized logging, then you have Log Insight, or you can use cloud service Wavefront. Also can be used for the auto scaling, also can be used for the monitoring, analytics, and stuff like that. So, what we actually, what VMware is offering to the customers, and we are one of the customers as well, because we are using this in the development. We have configuration already running in our small data center. These are the main benefits which this configuration is bringing to you. It's always high availability, especially if you have complicated and stretched data center at least at 2 locations. You have a scaling, automatic scaling. All these best buzzwords from the cloud native perspective are already offered by this solution. So auto scaling, health checking, life cycle management, and of course this integration with other components. So what is the biggest benefit? Once more, this is production grade, already implemented, deep integration with NSXT, Kubernetes version certified, container registry with the security enabled, integration with the cloud providers, and of course, maybe the biggest advantages of this system, especially for the already VMware users, it's a single pane of glass. So you can have traditional workload loaded on the virtual machine who are happily running like a few years now in your data center, and you can just plug new component and use the same tool, same environment for managing Kubernetes clusters and your traditional workload, let's say monolith structure, monolith application, or whatever. But of course, this is not all. This infrastructure, there is a quite big number of the users who are testing and trying and not fully aware of the benefits who cloud is bringing to them. So VMware and AWS are working together to provide both and best from the both worlds. Use VMware best in quality products like vSphere, like vSun, like NSXT, and the best from the AWS infrastructure, bare metal infrastructure available, and create one new product, let's say it's a hybrid cloud, where you can even go further and interconnect public cloud and the VMware cloud on AWS and create one single administration point. Once configured, your administrator don't have to bother with the AWS. They have to use only VMware tools, VMware available utilities, and manage everything from the single point. Without leaving VMware infrastructure, everything handled by the VMware support. So if they have a trouble configuring something, VMware support will help them. They don't have to even go to the to AWS support. This is something which we are heading. So you can use VMware Cloud on AWS, create what we call software-defined data center on the AWS infrastructure using dedicated hosts, bare metal hosts, create everything and load your load in a simple and way which administrator already know and familiar. You can use some special, colleague will talk about that, some special connectors to interconnect, use some great benefits, vMotion and stuff like that, to migrate even, to test without downtime seamlessly from your on-prem data center to the AWS, test everything, and if satisfy your expectation, then keep it running and operating that way. For maybe full transition, for maybe disaster recovery solution, for maybe safe backup solution, in whatever case it can be used, and it is available and it is provided by joint venture between VMware and AWS. That's it. Any question? Yes? Please.
Hello. Regarding clients that don't want to move the cloud, what are, in your opinion, some best or top arguments why they shouldn't move to cloud?
Okay, this is not easy to answer really, because some of our clients, some of our customers are, let's say, under special government regulation. So they have to fulfill a zillion of questionnaires in order to move to the cloud. Let's say banking. It's not natural for them to use cloud still. Although AWS has these special design government usage stories or whatever they call it, but still banking is not willing to switch to the cloud. So they are still willing to operate on their own controlled data center. We cannot stress them enough that it's not much that different. I mean, you have to protect it. If you have lousy and not really quality administrator, then your data is really exposed, like in the cloud. No change there. Even following best practices in the cloud will assure that you have secure environment. But let me tell that maybe laws and some internal procedure in country are stopping them from moving to the. And this is okay. I mean, it's not about forcing them to leave, to go to the cloud. It has to be their choice, because there are some ups and downs by moving to the cloud. It's not everything white and blue, black and white. I mean, if they want to stay, this is something which VMware offers, to have this cloud native approach, to use the same code in the cloud. I mean, you notice that we are using Kubernetes vanilla version. If you will switch to the EKS in the AWS, same code will apply. Maybe you will have to change load balancer and storage, but those are 2 lines only. Everything else is the same. No change in the code. You can easily switch to the cloud. So if they want to have their own data center and they want to invest and don't want to recognize the benefit of the OPEX versus CAPEX, then yeah. Yes.
Hi, one question. Do you have any suggestions for a web self-service portal that can manage Kubernetes environments, for example, for developer teams?
Not really sure. What do you mean about self web portal for managing? No, in this version 1.5, you still have to manage it via a vCenter. And we see it as a benefit. Next version will bring, I mean, when you are handling Kubernetes by itself offering dashboard, you are probably aware of it. So you can fully use the dashboard by the Kubernetes without any restriction. Everything what is available by the Kubernetes is available. But VMware did not implement any web solution for the managing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there are some automation tools, but they are not part of the PKS. There are some other utilities from the VMware, yes.